My own brother, in his greed for our family's inheritance, was the one who dragged me into a 5S level horror instance. He fully expected me to be torn apart by the horrors within, but just as he was relishing that thought, the very specters he feared began to shower me with gifts. The headless gentleman from next door presented me with a bouquet of flowers he'd grown in his own garden. The kindly ghost of an old woman knitted me a sweater to keep me warm. The infamous bloodchild placed its most cherished possession, a whistle carved from bone, around my neck. Each of these items was at least 2S level in power. The jealousy in my brother's eyes burned red. What he never knew, and what our family never bothered to learn, was that before they took me in, I had already spent a decade of my life not just surviving, but working within these very instances. I had only just been brought into the fold of the family when my so-called brother, Victor, pulled me into this horror game. My supposed parents played their part perfectly, putting on a show of reluctant necessity. "We're doing this for your own good," they'd said, their voices dripping with false sincerity. "You've only just come home. If you were to walk straight into the corporation, the old guard on the board would surely have objections. You must prove your worth." Victor chimed in, his concern just as manufactured. "Mom and Dad were planning on just giving the company to me," he started, feigning fairness. "But you're my sister. To make things even, whoever can clear the instance the fastest will receive the inheritance." I rolled my eyes, my patience already worn thin. "Just cut the theatrics. Which instance is it?" Nobody is in a particularly good mood when they're yanked from their bed at the crack of dawn, especially not a night owl like me who had only managed to fall asleep at 4 in the morning. Seeing that I had agreed without a fight, a triumphant smile spread across Victor's face, one that spoke of absolute certainty. Blackwood. Blackwood was the only 5S level instance that had ever manifested. It was unique and utterly unforgiving. Unlike in other instances, if you died in Blackwood, you were presented with two choices. You could become one of its resident specters, or you could return to the real world and die instantly. However, becoming a specter wasn't a guarantee of continued existence. You first had to be accepted by the instance's guardian. Since Blackwood first appeared, only 5 individuals had ever successfully cleared it. Aside from the enigmatic first player, whose identity remained a complete mystery, the other 4 were now living legends in the world of horror instances. It was painfully obvious that Victor's plan was to have me trapped in here for all eternity. Seeing my silence, he must have mistaken it for hesitation or fear, because he immediately tore the teleportation scroll in his hand. "Too late to have second thoughts now," he sneered. Once the scroll is activated, the only way out is to either clear the instance or die within it. Victor had absolutely no idea that before this family ever found me, I had been working in these instances for 10 long years. On the outside, I projected an image of anger and frustration, but inwardly, a different emotion was stirring: nervousness. I couldn't help but wonder if my old friends would be upset with me. 5 years ago, I had promised them I would come back to visit as soon as I had the chance, but I became so bogged down with corporate work and university studies that the promise went unfulfilled. In a strange way, Victor dragging me back here was a blessing in disguise. When I opened my eyes again, the familiar gloomy landscape of Blackwood spread out before me. Looking at the cobbled streets I knew so well, a genuine smile crept across my face. Old friends, Elena is back. Once we were fully inside the instance, I finally understood the source of Victor's supreme confidence. He had spent a fortune acquiring a massive collection of S-level items or higher before we entered, all to ensure his own survival. On top of that, my so-called parents had paid an exorbitant sum to hire 2 legendary players who had previously cleared this very instance to lead our team. There was Marcus, the second player to ever clear Blackwood, whose expression was a permanent mask of cold detachment. And then there was Chloe, the player who held the record for the fastest clear time, who appeared to be a bubbly and endearingly cute girl. As for me, I didn't have the money for such fancy equipment. My parents had used my young age as a convenient excuse to seize control of all the assets that rightfully should have been mine. I was completely broke, so my only piece of gear was a battered old burlap sack I carried over my shoulder. Seeing the sack, Victor couldn't resist another jab. "You're really bringing that piece of garbage in here?" You're my sister, after all. Do you want me to spot you a few items? I was too preoccupied with assessing the current state of Blackwood to waste my breath on him. I'm good, I said, patting the dust from my sack. The things inside the sack weren't worth much in terms of money, but to me, they were far more valuable than any of his so-called S-level items. Nearly every player who ventured into the instance chose to stay at the town's only inn. A stone tablet set by the main entrance was carved with the rules of Blackwood. Each room must be occupied by a minimum of 2 people. Ignoring this rule will result in termination by a specter. Items can only be obtained if a specter offers them as a gift. Taking them by force will result in severe retaliation from all of Blackwood's residents. To clear the instance, you must receive gifts from 3 or more bosses. Otherwise, you fail. Players may stay in the town for a maximum of 7 days. Failure to clear the instance within the time limit will result in termination. As night began to fall, a thick, oppressive fog enveloped Blackwood, and the specters began their hunt. Normally, the boss-level specters only appeared at the very end of an instance. To demonstrate how generous and brotherly he was, Victor had arranged for Chloe to stay in the same room as me. Starting from the first floor, the specters began knocking on each door. Open up! These were just the common, weaker specters. The violent knocking echoed throughout the inn, the force so immense it felt as though the doors would be smashed from their hinges. Chloe had cleared this instance before, so she was experienced with these particular creatures. Don't be scared, she whispered. As long as you don't open the door, they can't get in. I didn't fully trust her, but if she was making an effort to be nice, I wasn't going to refuse it. Okay, I replied. The waiting was a little boring. I sat cross-legged on the bed, binge-watching a drama on my phone, while devouring a huge slice of strawberry cake I'd packed. Chloe looked at me with a surprised expression as if she had never encountered a player so relaxed in a horror instance before. She looked like she wanted to say something, but then remembered her employer was Victor and chose to keep her mouth shut. Just then, a shrill, piercing whistle cut through the entire inn. Chloe's relatively calm expression instantly contorted into one of panic. How could it be that one? It's not supposed to show up yet. Everyone knew that in Blackwood, the only specter capable of producing such a whistle was the 2S level Bloodchild. Even though it was the designated boss of the first night, it was only supposed to appear in the final few minutes. This particular specter was incredibly difficult to deal with. Very few players ever managed to receive a gift from it. Its childlike nature made it impossible to predict what it wanted. One time, a simple piece of candy might earn you a gift, but the next time it could demand something completely different. It all depended on its mood, so most players didn't even bother trying. Of course, some players would try their luck, but they always ended up as food for the Bloodchild. Chloe, with her extensive experience, reacted quickly. She covered her ears, then pulled a thick rope from her backpack and tied her hands securely behind her back. Then, she tossed another length of rope to me, signaling for me to do the same. Hurry! Don't just stand there! Players with weak minds would be controlled by the Bloodchild's whistle, compelled to open the door and walk out, only to have their throats torn out. Soon, the sounds of players' screams and visceral terror filled the inn. Most of the players were not prepared for the Bloodchild to appear so early. The inn's hallways and rooms were quickly littered with severed limbs and gruesome bloodstains. A loud thud came from Victor's room next door. It sounded like Victor couldn't resist the whistle's hypnosis and was frantically trying to open the door, but Marcus managed to stop him. Just then, the Bloodchild's whistle was right outside our door. The whistling grew faster, louder, until it was almost unbearable. Chloe had already passed out from the mental strain. In a daze, I walked to the door, hesitating for only a moment before reaching for the handle. Another sharp whistle pierced the air, and I pulled the door open. Standing there was a large-headed baby girl with wrinkled, pale blue skin. She puffed out her cheeks, blowing with all her might on a bone whistle. Her large, round head reflected the dim light, looking strangely, morbidly cute. Seeing someone open the door, she giggled with glee. He, can I eat you now? Then she opened her mouth wide and lunged at me. Just as she was about to bite down, I reached out, wrapped my arms around her small frame, and gently kissed her oversized head. Tiny Tess, I whispered, I'm back. For a moment, the Bloodchild froze completely. A few seconds later, she started moving again. She let out a petulant huff and lunged at me again, trying her best to look fierce. Who cares that you're back? I'm gonna bite you to death. Her chubby little face was contorted in a ferocious expression as she opened her mouth wide, but just as she was about to bite me, the motion immediately softened. She gently rested her head on my shoulder, her big, blood-red eyes filled with a deep sense of longing. Bad sister, she mumbled. I thought you were never coming back. My heart melted. I stroked the blood child's head. I missed you most of all, Tiny Tess. How could I not come back? I knew it. When I was working in the instance, Tiny Tess was always the clingiest. That was because I was the only one who could make her favorite dessert, chocolate-flavored human brain cookies. She must have sensed that I was back and came to find me first. After all, according to the instance's usual schedule, it wasn't her turn to appear yet. Tiny Tess lifted her head. It's not just me. Mr. Henderson, Grandma Willow, they all came. They're waiting for you outside the inn. Oh, and the warden said you're in some kind of trouble this time. Do you need our help? I glanced at the door to Victor's room. No, I can handle it myself. I'll come find you all when I get a chance. Your time is almost up. You should go back now. With that, I pulled a colorful rattledrum from my burlap sack and handed it to her. Is this a present for me? I love it. Thank you, sister. This is for you. I have to go now. Tiny Tess hung her prized 2S item, the bone whistle, around my neck, and, shaking her new rattle, went off to visit the other floors. The players' screams echoed through the inn again, lasting until the first light of dawn. After the bloodchild left, the inn fell silent once more. The first night was finally over. When the sun came up, the survivors straggled out of their rooms. After the previous night's unexpected events, they were all much more cautious. Many teams that had lost members temporarily joined forces to form new, larger groups. When Victor knocked on my door, I was busy organizing the things in my sack. These were all items I had collected over the past 5 years, all for the day I could bring them back to my friends in the instance. For someone like me who grew up without parents, these specters felt more like family than anyone else. I opened the door to find Victor and Marcus standing there, along with several other players. They were all looking to Victor as their de facto leader. I had already guessed that the family had sent more people than just Marcus and Chloe, so I wasn't surprised to see them. Victor seemed a little disappointed to see me completely unharmed. Sister, are you okay? What? Are you disappointed? No, of course not. I just want you to be safe. I heard you got a gift from the bloodchild last night. Congratulations. He said the word congratulations, but his eyes were filled with undisguised jealousy. He looked like he wanted to rip the bone whistle from my neck and put it on his own. After all, it was a rare 2S level item. I ignored him. I loved seeing him hate me, but be unable to do anything about it. But what's with bringing all these people to my room? You saw what happened last night. These specters are getting crazier. For our own safety, let's all stick together from now on. To convince me to stay with them, Victor swapped our regular rooms for a luxury suite with 4 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. I wasn't going to turn down a free upgrade to a bigger room, so of course I agreed. They must have seen me get away from Tiny Tess unharmed, so they knew I had her gift. Victor's suggestion that we all stay together probably wasn't coming from a good place, but I was curious to see what tricks he had up his sleeve. After breakfast, Marcus and Chloe suggested we leave the inn to look for clues. I didn't really have an opinion on their proposal. I had worked in this instance for 10 years. I even knew where my headless neighbor, Mr. Henderson, hid his secret stash of cash. Finding clues was a piece of cake for me. With Marcus and Chloe around, any specters that came looking for trouble were easily dealt with. I walked at the back of the group, watching them work. The creatures attacking us at this stage were all low level. None of my old friends were among them, so I wasn't worried at all. The guardian of this instance was a 3S level specter known as the town warden. I had only ever seen him at the town residents meeting, which happened once every 2 years. He almost never came out otherwise. According to the instance rules, players could use the clues they collected to trade for gifts from the bosses. Get the gifts and survive for 7 days, and you cleared the instance. Marcus and Chloe, using their past experience, quickly found most of the clues needed to pass. Just as we were looking for the last few clues, a new set of rules appeared in the sky. A temporary 3S level clue-finding quest was added to Blackwood. Clue 1, Grandma Specter's reading glasses. Clue 2, the demon barber's scissors. Clue 3, a flower from the headless neighbor's garden. And the guardians of these clues were all 2S level specters. If players couldn't find the clues by midnight, they would all be dragged into the town residents' masquerade ball. At the masquerade ball, all players and specters would wear identical masks and similar cloaks. If a player couldn't tell the difference between another player and a specter, they would be immediately terminated. Every player's face fell. Wow, they aren't even trying to hide it. Was this supposed to kill them, or kill them? The instance rules have changed and the difficulty has shot up. What's going on? Victor's face was pale. What do we do now? Can we just go back to the inn? According to the rules, as long as players hid in their rooms at the inn, specters couldn't actively break in to hunt them. Marcus and Chloe shook their heads. A 3S level quest is mandatory. Even if we return to the real world, we'd be dragged back to participate. We have to complete it, or we'll be hunted down no matter where we run. When I saw the new rules, I felt both helpless and touched. For other players, these tasks were a nightmare. For me, they were free points. I could find these things with my eyes closed. I had said I could handle Victor and his crew on my own, but their blatant favoritism warmed my heart. It felt pretty good to have family looking out for me. To clear the quest, we needed to deal with the guardian specters and grab the clues. Victor suggested using his S-level items. I was just thinking, since when is Victor so generous? Then I heard Marcus voice a different opinion. This is a 3S level instance. Items of that rank will be less effective here. Didn't Miss Elena get a gift from the Bloodchild last night? That's a 2S level item. It'll work much better than an S level one. A flicker of something crossed Victor's eyes. Sister, if you're willing to use your item, we'll compensate you with others. I'm sure you don't want to fail the instance, right? I was wondering when they'd make their move, so this was it. I really wanted to say that even if they all failed, I wouldn't, but it wasn't worth arguing with them. I couldn't be bothered. As soon as Victor finished speaking, the other surviving players who had gathered there chimed in. Yeah, Miss Elena, the instance has changed. For everyone's safety, you should just hand over the item. Someone muttered under their breath. A 2S level item is wasted on a rookie like you anyway. You might as well give it up. Exactly. A little girl like you will probably just cry when the real monsters show up. These people were so damn patronizing. I scanned everyone in the group. Is that how you all feel? Meeting my gaze, most of the players, except for a few with a shred of conscience, seemed to think it was my duty to hand over the bone whistle. Never mind that the item was mine to begin with. It was a gift from Tiny Tess. How I used it was my business, and no one had the right to tell me what to do. It's my item. I have the right to use it or not, and I don't need you all telling me what to do. If you're so good at lecturing, why don't you go try reasoning with the specters? Maybe they'll be so offended by your bad breath, they'll just hand over the clues. I fanned my hand in front of my nose as if their stench was getting to me. They seemed shocked that a rookie player would have the nerve to talk back. Feeling like they'd been disrespected, they tried to save face. You little brat, what did you say? If it weren't for the fact that you're from the what? Go on, finish your sentence. Just then, Victor stepped in to play peacemaker. Everyone, don't make things hard for my sister. If she doesn't want to, then let's drop it. I think we should focus our efforts on finding the clues together. We'll have a better chance that way, don't you all agree? As the heir to the family corporation with two legendary players like Marcus and Chloe backing him up, Victor had no trouble rallying the crowd. In the end, all the surviving players agreed to focus their efforts on getting the clues first. To avoid any more drama, I announced I was forming my own team of one. Before they could react, I plunged into the town's thick fog. Behind me, I could faintly hear Victor's concerned voice. I wonder if my sister will be in danger looking for clues all by herself. The other players started comforting him, saying he was a great brother who had done his best to look out for me and that I was just ungrateful. Looked out for me. Remembering the real reason I was lost in the first place, I could only laugh. Victor thought I had no memory of my life before I was 3, but He didn't know I was a prodigy. I started talking at 1, and by 2, I had memorized entire classic texts. Later, I showed an incredible talent for mathematics. Back then, the head of the family, my grandfather, even said that the future of the company might one day rest on my shoulders. As for my short-sighted parents and my mediocre older brother, they weren't capable of leading the family business to greater heights. At the time, Victor was already 12, old enough to understand what was happening. In his eyes, I was a threat to his position in the family. So when I was 3 years old, during a family outing, Victor had someone abandon me. They left me in the middle of nowhere. That was when, by a strange twist of fate, I stumbled into the Blackwood instance and became a special part of it. My thoughts returned to the present. Following the path from memory, I first went to Grandma Willow's house. The familiar figure was there, wearing her reading glasses and knitting in a rocking chair made of human bones. I called out to her from a distance. "Grandma Willow!" The sound startled the low-level specters wandering nearby, and they started to close in on me. But before they could even touch my clothes, Grandma Willow shooed them away. Her head swiveled 180 degrees, and she greeted me with a wide smile. She looked just like any other sweet old lady. "Long time no see, little Elena." I rushed into her arms. "I missed you so much, Grandma Willow. How have you been?" Grandma Willow patted my back affectionately, and we chatted like a grandmother and granddaughter catching up. There were a few minor hitches, of course. At one point, her false teeth fell out. A little later, her hands detached themselves and scurried off to the kitchen to cook. But I was used to it. We talked for nearly 20 minutes before I sensed other players approaching and reluctantly said my goodbyes. Before I left, I pulled some special heat patches for her from my sack. The patches were incredibly effective for both humans and specters. I had done a ton of research and waited in a long line to buy them. Grandma Willow suffered from severe arthritis in her legs. On gloomy days, the pain was bone deep, and the only relief she found was by chopping her legs off. It was hard for her to get around without her legs, so this gift was perfect. She was so happy with the gift that her eyes literally popped out of her head with laughter. "You should go now, little Elena. Don't worry, I'll take care of these people for you, especially that nasty brother of yours." "Thanks, Grandma Willow, but don't kill him. Letting him die that easily would be letting him off too lightly. And please be careful." "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." With Grandma Willow's reading glasses in hand and wearing the sweater she had knitted for me, I cheerfully headed next door to the headless neighbor, Mr. Henderson's house. When I got there, Mr. Henderson was being punished by his wife, kneeling on a row of knives. Literally. It was a bloody mess. Apparently, Mr. Henderson had gone fishing and gotten so absorbed that his head had been washed away by the river. He came back empty-handed and without his head. By the time he found it, the fish had gnawed it to shreds, leaving only half a skull. Everyone called him the headless specter, but he actually had a head. It just had a habit of falling off, so he usually left it at home when he went out or was on a mission. I have no idea why he decided to take it fishing this time. Mr. Henderson, kneeling on the knives again? Mrs. Henderson was thrilled to see me and went to cut up some fruit. I secretly gave Mr. Henderson some advice. I told him how to get back in his wife's good graces, and he was so moved that he insisted on giving me a massive bouquet of flowers so big I could barely hold it. Meanwhile, Victor and his team were still trapped in Grandma Willow's yarn maze. Even with Marcus and Chloe protecting them, the 2S-level specter was giving them a hard time. The yarn maze seemed to be alive, appearing and disappearing at will, waiting for a chance to devour a player. Coincidentally, every time Victor was about to be swallowed, the maze would narrowly avoid him, and a nearby player would become the victim instead. After a while, the other players started to notice the pattern, and the way they looked at Victor began to change. If I were there, I would have given Grandma Willow a big thumbs up. Age and experience really do count for something. After leaving gifts for Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, my next stop was the shop of the Demon Barber, my friend Sweeney. I also had to visit Aunt Iris the Tentacle Monster, Mona the Slit-Mouthed Woman, and Chainsaw Chuck. I made a dozen stops in a row, collecting quite a few gifts from my old friends. My last visit was to Tiny Tess, the Bloodchild. She usually slept during the day and woke up at dusk. When I arrived, she was just getting up. Tiny Tess and her friends lived in an orphanage. Most of the infants here had been abandoned for various reasons, and their resentment was so strong that they were all high-level specters, at least A grade. Tiny Tess was the most powerful among them. She saw herself as the big sister who had to take care of her younger siblings, so she was usually the one who went on missions. The moment the little baby spirits saw me, they all turned into perfect angels. I got to pinch their little cheeks, kiss their little hands, rub their little bellies, and pat their little bottoms. I hugged one, kissed another. I was having the time of my life. Well-behaved kids are just so adorable. Finally, after giving them all the presents I had brought, I prepared to head back to the inn. My sack was empty now, except for one last gift, which I had saved for the warden. Tiny Tess didn't want me to leave and tried to follow, but I managed to talk her into staying. It was already evening when I got back to the inn. My legs felt like noodles after walking all day, so I decided to take a nap. Meanwhile, Victor's team had just acquired the flower from the headless neighbor and were heading towards the demon barber's shop. The flower I got was a huge bouquet. The one they had was a single, tiny, malnourished-looking bloom. It was obviously one of the flowers Mr. Henderson was planning to throw away. If they couldn't get all the clues by midnight, they would be dragged into the masquerade ball. The masquerade ball was a direct quest from the town warden, and its difficulty would be even higher than that of Blackwood itself. If that happened, they might all end up dead in this instance. The demon barber's shop was just ahead, surrounded by a crowd of specters. The clue was inside. Victor looked terrible. His clothes were in tatters, and he was covered in blood and wounds. Even in this state, he was still keeping up appearances. I haven't seen Elena anywhere. Where could she have gone? I'm really worried about her. In his heart, he had already written me off as dead. The other players knew it too. A lone player like me was probably already torn to shreds by specters. The players who usually agreed with him were now silently resting and tending to their wounds, ignoring him completely. Victor noticed this. Wanting to save face, he tried to rally the players to prepare for the next challenge, but no one moved. After the previous encounters, most players had seen his selfish nature and were no longer willing to follow his lead. Seeing that his words had no effect, Victor's expression turned grim. But he was a master of appearances and didn't want to completely alienate the other players yet, so he had the people his family sent go first. The players braced themselves, preparing their items to face the demon barber. Fortunately, Marcus and Chloe were still reliable, and they finally managed to open the door to the shop. But when the door swung open, it revealed an empty room. A large sign was propped up in the middle of the shop. This shop has moved to another street. The new address is 444 Skull Road. At the bottom was a comical ghost face, as if mocking them. The moment they saw the sign, every player's face turned green. There was only 1 minute left until midnight. This meant that no one here was going to clear the quest. Victor was so angry, he coughed up blood, his face as pale as a ghost's. A complaint! I want to file a complaint against this instance, against this demon barber. I want to... Before he could finish, all the players vanished from the spot. When they reappeared, they were at the town residents' masquerade ball. It was a dimly lit auditorium. The room was illuminated by white candles and decorated with various human bones and skulls. There were also all sorts of food and drinks brought by the town residents. Human blood millefeuille, durian cake, mint-flavored human eyeball boba slushies, chewy and spicy stir-fried tongue rice cakes, stringy hair cheese pizza. Players and specters were each given a red or white numbered tag and entered wearing identical masks. The numbers on the tags corresponded, and those with the same number were paired up. Players and specters were mixed, meaning your opponent could be a human or a specter. You could only pass if you correctly identified your opponent. Otherwise, you were terminated. I had been asleep in my room, but when I opened my eyes, I was in the town auditorium holding an invitation. The masquerade ball was a special welcome ceremony arranged just for me. I knew this place well. The town residents' meetings were always held here. This event was personally hosted by the town warden. Under the intimidating presence of a 3S level specter, no one was foolish enough to cause trouble. This was the first time the town warden had appeared before humans. Previously, only the specters had seen him. The players had expected the warden to be an old man, but he turned out to be a handsome man, 6'3" with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. At first glance, he was more dazzling than any celebrity from the human world. To be honest, the first time I saw the warden, I was also a bit starstruck. He was the most handsome person, human or specter, I had ever seen. Many players thought it would be easy to tell the difference between specters and other players, but they realized they were wrong as soon as they entered the auditorium. The masks were identical, the cloaks were similar, and everyone had a voice changer. At a glance, even height and build seemed the same. The numbers were announced. Coincidentally, my opponent was Victor. I had a photographic memory and superhuman powers of observation. No human or specter could hide their true identity from me. A bell chimed, and the warden announced the start of the game. A long table was set up in the center of the auditorium, with each pair sitting opposite each other. At some point, all the lights went out, leaving only the area around the table illuminated. The rules: players and specters have 5 minutes to observe and question each other. You can ask 3 questions. The person with the white number tag asks first. You pass if you correctly write down your opponent's identity. Passing earns you 1 2S level item. If both sides pass, they can, with mutual consent, duel to win the other's item. The duel format is their choice. Specters had their own special ways of communicating, so they could easily recognize each other. Overall, this game was heavily stacked against the players. First pair, begin. The player and specter had to write their opponent's identity on a board in front of them. It was a bad start. The first pair were both players, but both wrote down the wrong identity. The 2 players were quickly dragged away by specters lurking in the shadows. Their screams echoed from the darkness. The sound of crunching bones filled the air, and a terrifying atmosphere spread through the auditorium. Then came the second pair, the third, the fourth. As time ticked by, only 5 players managed to pass, while 20 specters had cleared the round. Some players couldn't take the pressure and tried to escape with teleport scrolls or use items to kill specters, but they were all swiftly suppressed. By the end, most players were on the verge of a mental breakdown, especially those who enjoyed torturing specters and had done terrible things. Some had already lost their minds. They were devoured before they could even write down an identity. Dawn was approaching. The last pair was me and Victor. He had the white number tag. Although Victor was on the brink of collapse, I had to admit that his elite education was paying off. During the 5-minute observation period, he gradually calmed down. I thought he wouldn't ask any questions, but his first one was surprisingly sharp. Victor, what color is the sky during the day? Thinking of the ever-changing sky in the real world and the perpetually dim sky in the instance, I pondered for a few seconds before answering. It can be any color. Victor, is strawberry cake sweet? I've never had it, so I don't know. It was common knowledge that specters couldn't taste sweetness. No matter how I answered, it would be wrong. It was better to plead ignorance. Victor, do you think it's better to be human or a specter? I didn't answer that question. In that moment, I suddenly realized that Victor wasn't as arrogant and stupid as he appeared. All 3 questions seemed simple, but each one was a trap. Actually, my answer to the last question didn't matter. He had already seen through me from my answer to the first question. In the world of specters, there was no concept of day or night. That was a definition brought in by the players who entered the instance. So, no matter how I answered, I would have been wrong. Sure enough, when the time was up, Victor wrote down my identity on his board, player Elena. I knew you weren't dead. I shot back, you're still alive and kicking, so of course I couldn't leave before you. I had also written down his identity, player Victor. The warden announced the results. Player Victor passed, player Elena passed. We both answered correctly, so according to the rules, we would both receive a passing item. But Victor was clearly not satisfied. A bloodthirsty smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. I demand a duel. Sister, do you agree? In that moment, I had to admit we were truly brother and sister, both with a streak of madness in our blood. Because my own blood was boiling. We were born to be enemies. Victor proposed a duel using items. He had even taken the items that Marcus and Chloe had just won. That's right. They were both among the players who had passed. To everyone else, it looked like Victor was bullying the weak, but only I knew that I had more items than I could count. Victor thought I was too poor to afford items, but in reality, I was the most well-equipped person in the entire arena. He threw every item he had at me. Almost all of them were S level with several 2S items mixed in. Shadow Frost, Celestial Fire, Dragon's Wrath. A bolt of lightning flashed, but it was blocked by the sweater I was wearing, the one Grandma Willow had knitted for me. A clap of thunder struck, but it was nullified by a barrier from my bone whistle. A water dragon surged forward, but it was stopped by a sea of petals from Mr. Henderson's flowers. A venomous snake lunged, but it was snipped into pieces by a pair of sharp scissors. These were all 2S level items. With their help, I didn't even get a single scratch. The more Victor fought, the more shocked he became until he was on the verge of a breakdown. By the time he used his last item, he still hadn't defeated me. Finally, Victor completely lost control, his eyes red with jealousy. How do you have so many high-tier items? You cheated. You must have cheated. How did you trick these specters? Why would they give you all of their guardian items? I stood inside my protective barrier and smiled sweetly at him. Because they're my family. Victor lost the duel. He thought I was too poor to afford items, but he never knew that the specters had long considered me family, taking me under their protective wing and giving me only the best. In the end, I collected the 2S item Victor had just won and walked cheerfully over to the specters who had been cheering me on. Without any items, Victor couldn't pass the instance. The only thing awaiting him was death. But just as I turned away, a long sword pierced through my chest. Victor's voice was sinister. Let me teach you one last thing, little sister. All's fair in war. With that, he kicked me towards the crowd of specters. Victor had a 3S level item. It turned out that Victor was the very first person to ever clear the Blackwood instance. As the first one to pass, the instance had rewarded him with a 3S level longsword. The entire place erupted. Marcus and Chloe were also stunned. It finally clicked for them. No wonder the family had been so confident about sending Victor into the instance. He had this kind of trump card up his sleeve. All the specters went insane. Seeing me injured, they lunged at Victor with bared claws and teeth. They even started attacking the remaining players indiscriminately. But before the specters could even get close to Victor, they were swatted away by the sword. They were no match for its power. Marcus and Chloe quickly used their own emergency items to create a protective barrier. Marcus was distracted for a second, and Aunt Iris, the tentacle monster, twisted his legs off. Even if he made it out of here, he would be crippled for life. The players struggled to hold on while the specters raged. The usually kind and elegant Grandma Willow now had a ferocious expression. The adorable tiny Tess reverted to her true bloodchild form, her massive mouth ready to swallow the heavens. Mr. Henderson ripped off his head, his body suddenly growing enormous as he charged at Victor with a butcher's knife. They charged again and again, getting injured each time, their power levels slowly dropping. If they couldn't find a solution soon, they would all eventually fade away. I felt my life force draining away, my vision growing dark. The warden slowly walked to my side and sighed softly. You have two choices now. One, I save your life, but you can never enter an instance again, and everything that happens here will have nothing to do with you. Two, you choose to become a specter, but you must remain in this instance forever, and the outside world will no longer concern you. And even if you become a specter, there's no guarantee. When you awaken, you could be a common specter or a guardian level one. If you're just a common specter, you still won't be able to save them. Can you accept that? I thought back to when I first came here as a child, how I had to pester and plead with Grandma Willow and the others to accept me. My resolve hardened. After all, the best years of my life were spent with them. Without them, I would have died 1,000 times over. I want to save them. I believe in them, and I believe in myself. Just as my breathing stopped, a white light enveloped me. When I opened my eyes again, my once dark eyes were now mismatched, one black and one red, and a blood-red beauty mark had appeared between my brows. A notification from the game world sounded. Ding, instance updating, Blackwood instance successfully upgraded. New instance level 5S, new instance guardian, the Crimson Sovereign. Level 5S, the Crimson Sovereign. Skill, absolute domain, skill description. Within the Crimson Sovereign's domain, she has absolute control over all existence. I had become the new guardian of this instance. With a wave of my hand, all of Grandma Willow's and the others' injuries healed. I looked at them and said softly, "Leave the rest to me." Victor saw the change in me and lunged with his longsword, but he couldn't move an inch, frozen in place. I took the longsword from him and flicked the blade with my finger. "Do you remember how you got this sword? If you can't, I can help you recall." Then my hand shot out like a claw, and I ripped both of Victor's arms off. Blood splattered as he remained frozen in my domain, forced to watch his own life force drain away. This was absolute domination. It turned out that years ago, when Victor entered the instance for a mission, he ran into me. He recognized me, of course. Back then, he sweet-talked me, saying he knew he was wrong and hoped I could forgive him. He promised that if he could get back to the real world, he would find a way to bring me back to the family. I was young then and couldn't resist his pleading, so I believed him. But he was just using me to get the items needed to clear the instance. After he got the first clear reward, he showed his true colors. As if that wasn't enough, he used the item to severely injure me. If Grandma Willow and the others hadn't begged the warden to intervene, I wouldn't have survived. I was sent out of the instance to recover and didn't have a chance to return for 5 whole years. The experience was so traumatic that I had automatically blocked out the memory, only remembering it just now. This time, he had entered the instance with the full intention of erasing me for good. A look of terror appeared on Victor's face as he saw the undisguised killing intent in my eyes. "Sister, please spare me just one more time. I'll never bother you again, I swear. I'll turn over a new leaf. I'll go back and give up the inheritance. I'll give you everything. Just let me go." Victor never got to finish his sentence because I plunged the longsword into his chest. A few seconds later, his body collapsed, but he wasn't even given the chance to become a specter, because I wouldn't allow it. My will was now the law of the instance. Victor's body, along with the remaining survivors, was teleported out of the instance. In the game world, everyone was in shock. They discovered that the entrance to Blackwood had suddenly closed. When it reopened, the instance had become 5S level. The guardian of the instance had changed from the town warden to the Crimson Sovereign. The entire player community was buzzing, all desperately trying to get into the instance. And what about the original guardian, the warden? The official answer was that no one knew. After the instance was upgraded, he took the gift I gave him and disappeared. Some said he might be a high-level executive at the main game company. Others said he was killed by the Crimson Sovereign. The rumors were wild, and more people flocked to the instance to explore. With the upgrade, the items also leveled up, and the specters became more ferocious, but that didn't stop the players' enthusiasm. As for the family in the real world, Victor's death sent them into chaos. Other relatives condemned my parents for their failure to produce a worthy heir and demanded they hand over control. Being mediocre themselves, they couldn't hold on to the family business and could only watch as their power was stripped away, and they were kicked out of the corporation. They were also investigated for trading power for sex and ended up in prison. They regretted it then, regretted not stopping their son. Perhaps they had suspected their son was responsible for their daughter's disappearance. But doctors had told them that years of debauchery had ruined their bodies and they could no longer have children. Victor was their only heir. So even if they knew of their son's crime, they had to accept it. They even used the family's influence to cover up the past. That's why the world only knew that the first player to clear Blackwood was a mysterious figure, but not that it was Victor. I heard all of this from the players who came to clear the instance. But none of it had anything to do with me anymore. To pass the time, I opened a pawn shop in the instance. Any player who wanted a clue to clear the instance could come to my shop to make a trade. Whether they got a clue or not depended entirely on my mood. If they were lucky, they might even walk away with a 2S item. Tiny Tess volunteered to be my good luck charm, but she spent most of her time scaring away customers. Grandma Willow offered to help with my books, but her eyesight was so bad she couldn't read the numbers even with her glasses on. Mr. Henderson became the pawn shop's security guard, though he was often seen down by the small river behind the building. The place ended up becoming the liveliest spot in the entire instance. Countless other specters wanted to work for me, but I turned them all away. Are you kidding? If there were too many high-level specters around, how would I get any customers? Someone once asked me if I regretted giving up my chance to be human, giving up everything the family had to offer. I looked back at the town shrouded in mist. My voice was firm. No regrets. Because this place is my home, my sanctuary. Blackwood was anything but black and white. Every ordinary person is the hero of their own story.